Great.
3, 2, 1.
Welcome back to the Jeremiah Show.
3, 2, 1.
Welcome back to the Jeremiah Show. I'm here with Jenny Boyd, and her daughter Lucy is here as well. But Lucy's not going to talk. She told me. But welcome Lucy as well to the studio. Jenny's in studio. Last time you were all the way over in London that we spoke, and I think it was during COVID, so we were all trying to get used to Zoom and all that together. Yeah. We were talking about your new book before the break, Icons of Rock in Their Own Words by Jenny Boyd. And we were talking about the moment, the creativity at that time in rock and roll versus the difference now, and something that you're exploring a little bit in the book. And you had mentioned at one time that creativity, that energy is what people wish they had now. That spirit of it and living in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
When you mentioned you were shy. Up, when you were out, and these rock stars that you were out with, they weren't rock stars yet, right? But you were in this whole scene.
Well, I was
Eric Clapton,
right
Mick
from the
Fleetwood,
beginning. Yeah,
from the beginning.
Yeah,
I mean, George Harrison, the Beatles.
Yeah,
but you did they know that they were going to be the Beatles? That they know at that time?
No, you see, the Beatles were at their height, because we're talking, I think, sort of like 1964, and I must have been about 16, maybe coming to 17. I was at school, basically, high school. So George I met, and they were obviously, the Beatles were huge. But when I first met George, he was so ordinary, and he just seemed a little familiar.
Mm-hmm.
We'd seen his picture everywhere, but he was just like a regular guy. It was so nice, and he'd come back to our house, and we'd all have Sunday lunch together, and that was great. But I think with Mick, because we met when I was still at school, and he used to watch me go to the local coffee bar in Notting Hill Gate, where he was staying with his sister in a band called the Shanes. And he told me years later, he'd said to himself when he saw me coming back after school, that's the girl I'm going to marry. And anyway, so I met him then, and he was in the band The Shanes, but we got together before the whole Fleetwood Mac thing took off. And obviously that was when Peter Green was in the picture.
Richard destroying the studio, I think.
So, yeah, but, I think Fleetwood Mac really became very big when we all moved to LA, obviously, and everybody knows the story, with Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks, and suddenly it just took off.
Mm-hmm.
But I wasn't surprised, because when I heard them rehearsing right at the very beginning, I thought, they've got something. They really have, and it was all to do with their harmonies, because if you think of it, the Beatles' harmonies were what sort of really alerted everybody.
Mm-hmm.
There was just something about them that was just very inspiring.
You could feel it.
You could feel it.
Yeah. Well, how do you prepare when you're interviewing a music icon? How do you prepare? I mean, are they different than us mere mortals?
Well, when I interviewed, because with this book, we've got interviews done this year. So one of them was, I was telling you about, was Jacob Collier. And he said, musicians are different kinds of people. They're not like normal people. And I think, having lived with two different musicians, I think that's right. Because there's something that they have. I mean, I think musicians are wonderful. And I think, I always think musicians are the kind of spokespeople of our time. And they are different, because in a way, I think they go to different places than we do, or anybody that's creative.
But they don't share that a lot, right? I mean, I know through radio interviews, I listen to a lot with musicians will come into town on tour, and there's like 3 of the same questions that they get asked over and over, and it almost feels numbing. And so what you've done differently, what you did from the beginning, I think, is come to them and let them come to them from a real spot, a real place, a real human being, and let them explain. But it takes a little while, but it's in that silence that you mentioned.
That's
it's
right.
in that I'm listening, and they fill in the blanks.
That's right. Whether it was, what does music represent today? what is it saying to the masses? Because they are the spokespeople. I mean, I remember living in San Francisco for about 6 months, and I went there in 1967. I had no idea there was going to be flower power or anything like that. But the thing that struck me were the musicians. And I went to the Monterey Pop Festival, and, they were just, it was all about music. And we'd all wait for the next Bob Dylan album, or we'd all wait for the next Beatle album. It was huge. They were our spokespeople. They represented us. They represented the collective unconscious
And how you felt.
and how we felt. So they were like the spokespeople. And so that day, I mean, I'm sure they are still today, but it was very much more pronounced then. I was very much more aware of it.
And there was so much turmoil in the world at that time, as there is now. But I could see that the musician, when you say you're waiting for the album, you're waiting for the opinions, the viewpoints, the passion, or just the energy that they brought to you, made you feel more alive.
Yeah, because they were speaking for us in a way. They were sort of so in tune that they got it, and then you think, that's it. That's exactly how I'm thinking, and so it was different. I don't know if it's like that nowadays.
I was going to ask, is your life? I mean, do you feel? I feel the weight right now. It feels very heavy.
It's very heavy.
It's very heavy.
Yeah.
Where do you go now? Do you still need that? What you got from the music, from the musician now?
No, I think it was because then I was 18, 19. And so I was a lot younger, I was still finding out about the world. I was still finding out who am I, and then it was very much a lot of sort of the subculture, we were all on a path to self-awareness or, something much deeper thinking. And, and really it hadn't been that long since the end of the Second World War, so there was a completely different time.
Right.
Yeah.
The world was recovering, but then also being pulled back
exactly
to new things that were your generation that you felt. You wrote in the book, I couldn't help but feel enormously privileged to have had the opportunity to hear these musicians describe what it's like to play on stage in front of thousands, or to write a song and not know where the words came from, to hear about the magic of the muse, or to describe transcendence of self. Did you feel that transcendence when you were young and first discovered the music with your friends? Was it something that you remember
I think
consciously feeling?
Yeah, but I think the interesting thing, because I felt I wasn't creative, actually, I do remember, because as a teenager, I would write poems, and often words would come from nowhere, but I never really took it seriously. So I think if one's doing anything that's creative, whether it's sculpting or anything, you do transcend, you're kind of in the zone, and, time can go by and it might feel like just a few minutes. So, yeah.
Has that changed do you feel creative now? Or do you feel like,
I mean, I wrote that Jennifer Juniper book and felt totally fine just going for it. And when I was writing this book, the original one, Musicians in Tune, I definitely did. Words would come from nowhere. And I completely, I got what they were saying. And I knew what question to ask next, because I felt I was with them on their journey of them trying to describe what it feels like to be creative. Probably questions they'd never been asked before.
Well, I know you've been referred to as a muse probably a lot of your life, and I don't know how you feel about that, but have you ever stopped and considered and thought, I got something different from these icons of rock that no one was very few have been able to capture? There's a different relationship, and you're almost a conduit to the real person that's very complicated. Probably it doesn't trust a lot of people because of their status, and has been burned and is cautious. But you're something special that they have opened up to.
Yes, and I think that's right. in as much as they would know that I knew the Beatles and then had been there in India, that Patty, my sister, was very much involved with them. So I'd been with Mick for many years, known him. So they knew I was in the music world as not a musician, but somebody who was aware of musicians and their lives. And then with Ian, but not only that, I had that. So I was not one of them because I'm not a musician, but I was somebody who'd lived with musicians. When Fleetwood Mac, we were all living in the same house, at one point. But also having learnt, as I'd said before, got my master's in counseling psychology in counseling. And so I knew what it was like coming from that place, as well as their knowing that I was safe because I was I'd been part of the scene.
That's
so that was
a gift.
okay.
Do you agree that's a gift that you have? That
it might be.
It is.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of writers, there are a lot of people that have interviewed these big icons, but you got something different. And it's in the book. I want to encourage everybody to read Icons of Rock. Pick up your copy. Icons of Rock in Their Words by my guest today, Joni Boyd. You can find it right now on Amazon UK. You can also go to thejeniboyd.com and you can get an autographed copy and reach Joni there and follow all the great things she's doing. Icons of Rock, in their own words, from Eric Clapton to Mick Fleetwood, from Joni Mitchell to George Harrison, Icons of Rock is an incredibly intimate portrait of the world's greatest rock stars and their craft. We'll be right back.